we have a theme song now. I don't know how long it's going to last. I don't know how good it is, but we're going to give it a shot here, and then we're going to get into it. And yeah, let's start the show.
And we're live. You're listening to the Hashgraph Enthusiasts Show,
hosted by Brandon Davenport, aka It's Brandon D.
Feels good, eh? Wow, and it's actually real. I'm just grooving out to this right now. How cool is that? Probably doesn't sound super great on Twitter Spaces, but it's more for the podcast people, but it's for you people. It's for everybody. And yeah, I'm super excited. Big upgrades to the show. This is actually an actual production now. It's been too long. And really, it's like this is made possible because of contributors to the show, listeners of the show. There's no advertisements. There's no sponsors. It's just, listeners of the show, and they send HBAR to an address, and then I can make things happen with the show. And so we've received about close to 10,000 or so HBAR to the Hashgraph Enthusiasts account. And basically it's given me enough to buy a bunch of professional equipment. So now the show sounds a lot better. We're growing the show. It's a way for the listeners to say, hey, we want more of this. And just, I'm super grateful to everybody listening to the show, all the supporters, everybody who has, contributed HBAR, all that stuff. Just incredible. So really appreciate everybody. And, bear with me for the next couple episodes as I learn the gear, and get used to everything. It ain't my first rodeo, though. To be honest, I've done podcasts for a long time. It's been a while since I've had, proper equipment. So bear with me, and it'll continue to get better. I have many fun plans prepared for the show. And just before we get started, there's a quick note. The next episode on the 20th will be the last one of the year. I'm taking a break on the 27th. I got the holidays. I got family. I got stuff going on. And the show will be back in the new year. So next episode will be the last episode of 2023. So make sure to tune into that. But this is a big week. And one of the main things is that if I look at the current TPS of Hedera, like we're approaching an average of, 3,000 TPS, which is wild. I sent out a tweet yesterday that was like, we started this year at, 9 TPS. And now we're literally at, 3,000, getting close to 3,000. On this website, I just saw, 3,700 TPS. It's wild. It's crazy. And if that's not growth, I don't know what is. And there's a few stories, like some of the stuff we're going to talk about today is, of course, the new Hedera President, which I think is, the biggest news of the week easily, that just broke, hours, minutes ago, which is huge. Also, we've got FSCO that's gone live on Hedera, which is a use case that, we've talked about a lot on the show. And I think a lot of people have, been hoping for it to go live. The CEO, David, has been really open with the community and kind of what people can expect. And it's kind of been wild to see that unfold. So it's live, and I think it's having a big impact on the TPS. We're going to have to wait and see and dive into, who's submitting those transactions, what kinds of transactions are being submitted, but I think it's a big one. We're going to talk about the governing council meeting minutes. We're going to talk about some rumors around the Bitcoin ETF, all that kind of stuff. We're going to touch on some of the conversations I had recently on the show regarding carbon credits. I think that there was some new information and a new way of thinking about things that I think grabbed the Hedera community's attention. Just, a new way of thinking about it that I just wanted to talk about. Music NFTs, some other news, bull market thoughts, all sorts of different things. And just quick off the top, just a couple stories before we get into the main meat and potatoes of the show, talking about the new Hedera president. By the way, how weird is that? The president of Hedera. I can only imagine the memes that are going to come out of that. And also too, the president of Hedera's name is Charles. And one of the biggest critics of Hedera is also named Charles, right? The founder of Cardano. And so it's like this story of two Charles, We've got our Charles now, which is, it's kind of funny. But we're going to have to see how that goes. Bank Social. I had John on the show recently, CEO of Bank Social. Really great conversation. Lots of fascinating insights from him. Go back and listen to that episode. I don't know what number it is. But their wallet, their 2.0 wallet is launching tomorrow, which is huge. As people know, they're launching a new credit union. They're doing a bunch of crazy stuff. And yeah, I mean, I think it's a lot bigger than people perceive it. And there's a lot of energy behind it. So I'm interested to see kind of how it unfolds, but they have some big news tomorrow. They're launching their new wallet. And it's a multi-chain wallet. There's a lot of stuff going on. There was a spike in account creation on Hedera, quite a drastic spike actually. Shout out to HBAR Tata, who's currently listening down there. Shout out to you. A tweet yesterday, over 30,000 new accounts created on Hedera in the last 24 hours. 314,000 new accounts created in the last 30 days. So a substantial spike, not quite clear on like who it's from. I know that there was speculation that it was from the Slime World Nada use case. There were some other things, but your brain goes to, was that anything to do with FSCO? Is there another type of use case, potentially coming online? So we'll just have to see. But huge spike. And if this rate keeps up, you could argue that, 300,000, like hundreds of thousands of accounts being created every month or every few weeks, which is kind of crazy. Archax, a UK regulated institutional grade digital asset exchange, adds HBAR staking support. Now this is important because we've talked about, Archax quite a bit, real world assets. As people know, Archax is also involved with a bunch of stablecoin studio stuff. And they're really interesting because they're partnering with a lot of different use cases. Also Aberdeen with tokenizing their mutual funds, all different things like that. So when you look at, a big regulated exchange and you think about the holders of HBAR on that exchange, you think about the type of person that is, it's like, hey, these are the people that are going to maybe drive some of this major price appreciation on Hedera. So that's going to be exciting. And it's interesting because now that they have HBAR staking support, it just shows that some of these, major exchanges and institutions are kind of developing further into the ecosystem, into the network. And those people are getting more exposure to the ecosystem. So it's like, I think it's good. Another interesting story is VR Jam coming to Hedera. I'm interested in VR stuff. I'm interested in gaming stuff. This is a use case that originally was developing on, where were they? I think the HBAR Foundation sent out a tweet. They were on another network, was it? I don't want to say that, just a random network. They were originally on Polygon. So they're migrating from Polygon to Hedera, VR gaming type stuff, yada, yada, yada. I dig it. Well, I think this is going to be a common thing we're going to be seeing as things move on. I think it'll be interesting. And yeah, those are a couple quick things. One thing that's funny is I have this like script that I read at the beginning of the show. I don't know if I want to keep doing that. I'm really kind of, as the show grows and as things morph, I'm like, I don't know if I really want to read it. I mean, really what I say is like, hello from Ottawa, Canada, and what my name is and this and that, and what the day is and what the episode number is. So like, it's episode 105. And, we do the show live every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. It's on, all major podcast platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube. And, there's interview episodes. I did a great interview recently with Dave, CEO of Takeon, which was fantastic. And, get all the info you need about the show at itsbrandond.com/HBAR. Anyone listening live now, share the spaces. Let's get some more people in here. And yeah, I mean, I want to make the intros, a little tighter. I'm learning continually, improving the show. I mean, geez, it's been over 100 episodes. So, that's what it's all about. And check this out too, as we transition, what I'm going to be doing is stuff like this. Okay. So on to our next big story. The president of Hedera. What's that all about? Who is Charles? What's going on with that, and what does it mean? And I see IPEX down there. Maybe I'll have you up. Maybe IPEX just really quick after I get through this story, because I know you have a thread that you do every week, kind of, summarizing some big moments. So I'll bring you up in a second here. But yeah, so Hedera has a new president, and for people unfamiliar, like, what does that mean, right? Like what do they mean, president? So basically Hedera is an LLC, right? It's a company. It's owned by the governing council, as people know the members like Google and Boeing and IBM and this and that. And when you have an LLC or a kind of company, like maybe a corporation, there are really only two standard roles for a corporation: a secretary and a president, right? And those are just kind of, in every company out there, you have a secretary and a president. And other roles, like a CEO or something like that, those are just made up under the constructs of the company and its bylaws and this and that. But really, secretary and president are just the standard roles that every company has. It's nothing special. If you go to a coffee shop, right, they have a secretary and president. It's the legally required roles of a company. Very often for a startup, one person will hold those titles. Either it's a founder, or maybe it's a chair of the board, or what have you. So in Hedera, Brett McDowell, who is the chair of the Hedera board, served both of those roles, right? President and secretary. And recently this year, Hedera announced that they would be searching for a president. And what that meant was, at a very high level from the company, right, Hedera LLC, that's kind of decentralizing the roles, right? It's we have two roles that perform arguably kind of different tasks, and we're moving beyond the kind of bootstrapped startup stage, and we'll need two people to helm those roles. It's two separate roles, right? So Brett McDowell, who's the chair of the board, will I believe continue as secretary, but we have a new president, and so explain that way, it's kind of like, okay, it's not actually that exciting. It's a standard, role of a company, whatever. But when you flip it over, it's actually way more exciting than it sounds. And I think that that's how it's being received by the community, because on the surface, a lot of people don't know about those kind of intricacies of a company or whatever. So when you say the president of Hedera, that just sounds crazy and fun. And there's probably going to be a lot of memes about that. And, I think that, again, just the idea that, hey, it's the president of Hedera. I think it's going to be received really well. I think it's going to, there's going to be a lot of memes and a lot of fun stuff about it. But when we really get into it, the individual brought on as the president, Charles Atkins, I think, I'm really happy with the selection that the governing council made because of his background, but also because it addresses a very particular need that I think that a lot of people in the community have seen as a weak spot in Hedera, right? And that's marketing. I think that having a president of Hedera who has a very strong background in marketing, I think he's going to be able to influence the governing council in a way that I don't think they've been able to be influenced before. I think he's going to be able to drive a lot of initiatives that are important that maybe the governing council might have been blind to. And I think it comes down to this. The community saw a problem with Hedera, which was, the marketing for the network felt misaligned with the Web3 ecosystem, right? The crypto industry, rightfully so. But again, the other side to that was Hedera's ultra conservative approach, I think, mitigated a lot of risk, right? Like I think that it prevented Hedera from being swallowed up by a lot of controversy, or some of the pitfalls that a lot of other networks have experienced. So on one hand, it's like Hedera has been playing it very, very safe, which has, kept arguably a low profile for Hedera. But the flip side to that is that with a low profile, you don't get that attention. You don't get that mass adoption or mass awareness, which I think ultimately at this point will hurt Hedera. So I think that the solution Hedera was looking for was, instead of changing strategy, instead of changing the plan, instead of changing what they were doing, I think what they saw was, we need to change kind of like who's in charge of this. But I think it's less about, the marketing committee or someone involved with marketing at Hedera. I think it was a decision at the top, right? It's can we get someone at the very top of this organization that has that expertise and experience in marketing, both enterprise, but also major consumer brands, and also Web3? Can we get someone who understands those things? And then also on the flip side, have experience with the more traditional finance stuff. So you're talking about kind of a needle in a haystack, right? When you look at a person like that. And I think that how the community is receiving this news is Hedera may have found that needle in a haystack. And it just so happens his name is Charles, which, as I said, is kind of funny. But the news was announced literally just over an hour ago. Lehman Baird, inventor of the Hashgraph algorithm, co-founder of Hedera, tweeted out, hey, Charles, welcome. And that's pretty big. I mean, Lehman doesn't post on X, really at all. And a news story came out, and I just wanted to kind of run through the news story here. And this is really the update. It's very short, but this is basically the meat and potatoes of this announcement. So the Hedera Council, and I'm just going to read it quickly verbatim from the official news from Hedera. The Hedera Council today announced the appointment of Charles Atkins as its new president. Atkins brings a wealth of experience in Web3 technology, including key roles at prominent Web3 organizations such as Aptos and Polygon. Very interesting. As well as in finance, government, and consumer brands, making him a valuable addition to the Hedera leadership team and bringing a new set of relationships to the Hedera ecosystem. That's a key point there is I love hearing that line, right? Bringing a new set of relationships to the Hedera ecosystem. Continuing, Atkins expressed his excitement about joining Hedera. Quote, "I've always been very interested in the Hedera protocol and technology, but equally, if not more importantly, in the governance model and the impressive global governing council. Over the several decades that I've been in technology, I've seen that enterprise and government adoption holds the promise to enable the new use of technology by the masses. Hedera's approach to governance and relationships with some of the world's largest organizations have put them in a great position to be the distributed ledger technology of choice for the largest use cases requiring scale and security." So this sounds like a Hashgraph enthusiast to me, and I dig it. And I think you can already kind of tell reading from those statements from Charles, you know, he has that kind of marketing brain. He knows how to kind of hit the key points of different things and lay out some of these points in ways that resonate with people. And especially, you know, those lines really hit. Continuing, Brett McDowell, chair of the Hedera Council, commented, "We're thrilled to have Charles join us as president. His caliber of experience and expertise in financial services, government administration, go-to-market strategy, and Web3 technology uniquely qualifies Charles to serve as the next president of Hedera. His unbridled enthusiasm for Hedera's unique competitive advantage in this emerging market is inspiring, especially considering his executive experience at other respected Web3 platform companies." So there's Brett's side to it. And you can kind of already see, you know, the way Brett lays things out. You know, it kind of reads much more corporate, much more enterprise, and rightfully so. You know, the people at Hedera really steering the ship, you know, these are enterprise guys. And you can already tell from the comments from Charles, his brain just works a little differently. I think it works in the way that the community needs right now from a marketing standpoint. Now, let's get into the really juicy stuff here. So this is the last part of the article. Reading through, Atkins was most recently the global business development, the lead of global business development at Aptos, where he established relationships with Microsoft, EY, and Google. Prior to that, he was vice president of strategy at LandVault, and before that, he was vice president overseeing enterprise applications and financial services for Polygon Labs. He also held marketing leadership roles at Nike, Red Bull, and the Walt Disney Company, and worked for the U.S. Department of Treasury in a security-cleared role overseeing staff of over 120 people, and at Morgan Stanley. Atkins also formerly served as a startup mentor at Outlier Ventures, with over 80% of his mentees receiving seed or Series A funding upon program exit. So if you want to talk about a resume, if you want to talk about experience, if you want to talk about finding a needle in a haystack, you know, I think that if someone were to imagine, you know, what a president for Hedera would look like, and really, you know, it could be anything you wanted. I think this is what we kind of would all think of. It's like, you know, he checks all the boxes, right? He's got the previous experience in Web3 and leadership positions, both at Aptos and Polygon. So he knows the ecosystem. He knows how crazy it can be. But also, you know, he's got the experience, you know, on marketing, you know, working for Nike, Red Bull, Walt Disney. And then has that, you know, finance background at the U.S. Department of Treasury, Outlier Ventures. Outlier Ventures, you know, also already kind of integrated into the Hedera ecosystem. So it's a really interesting news item, right? It's very, very interesting. And I think it's super bullish for Hedera because, again, on so many different levels, even just, you know, people memeing about it, you know, president of Hedera. It's really interesting. And yeah, I think it'll be one for the books. And as the title for this episode, it will never be the same. I think it holds true. I came up with that title on Monday before any of this news kind of dropped. So I really think that I nailed it on that one. I brought IPEX up real quick just to share some thoughts. I know you do those threads for the week, but I wanted to maybe give you a couple minutes. I know you requested. I didn't know if you had anything to share with everybody.
Yeah, brother, appreciate you having me up. I don't usually tune into these live. I'm usually working at this time, so it's great to be here. So I don't know how you usually run the show if you bring people up, and I usually request regardless of the space. So yeah, I appreciate it regardless. Unless you don't usually have people up, then I'll happily step down. But no, I appreciate just listening to you delving into obviously the breaking news and what's going down in the network. If you want me to share the thread at the top, I'm happy to. If not, that's okay as well. But I'm loving the setup. I guess it was like the perfect space to tune into live.
Yeah.
I was loving the sound effects and the soundboard. I think it sounds good. I wouldn't worry about the Twitter quality.
Right
yeah, it sounded great, and I was loving every second of it for sure. Yeah, it's funny. I got a good laugh this morning, like an hour ago when I got up, and I'm on the West Coast in the U.S. and just seeing, starting my day, seeing we have a new president, Charles. I'm like, please don't tell me his last name is Hodgkinson's or whatever. And I was like, okay, please don't tell me he's like coming from Cardano or something. And then I was like, okay, I'm selling everything right now. We're setting it to zero. But
right.
yeah, and then just kind of reading through the article and seeing everyone post, and I saw your post, welcome, Mr. President, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's really exciting. Obviously, we already have Hangry, so we don't need another one, but
right.
It is what it is. I'm just kidding. But yeah, I'm loving it. I keep telling everyone, my holders, just community members in the space, like 2024, it's just going to be built different. Like one of the biggest things, and something you were talking about earlier was just talking about how like one of the things that Hedera's lacked in some capacity, and pretty much everyone knows this. Everyone that's been here, we agree, like on the marketing side, the retail side, we'll have it, and we don't even need to go into like the manipulation that other chains usually run with airdrops and certain little things like that right. Really get retail just all on a buzz, right? So we don't really do any of that here in a meaningful way that retail is just going to FOMO and come in and obviously lose a bunch of money. But on our end, like you said, like we've on the Hedera side, not necessarily we, but just Hedera in general, like we've seen historically has done their best to be strong on the regulation side, strong on making sure that what they're doing makes sense for the original vision of the 100-year company. And like, to me, yeah, short-term price action, seeing certain change pump and go do all that stuff. And yeah, it sucks. I think a lot of people are like, well, I'm leaving nature. I'm going to X, Y, and Z chain because they're up 100%. It's like, well, chase the bag, chase the pump, all that stuff. But it's like, unless you're taking profits and you're in it already, chances are you're going to be part of the percent that ends up losing money. So I'm more confident than ever every day, especially writing the threads, seeing what use cases. It's a way for me to stay on top of the use cases going live on the network. And I'm more bullish than ever after 2 years of being here, just growing the chain however I can and obviously contributing on the retail side. But I've never been more bullish on the enterprise side. And I think the retail side, I think we're entering that phase where we're just going to start waking up and becoming the giant that we've always been. So I'm more bullish than ever. I don't know if you can tell, but I'm super excited.
Oh yeah, I think that everybody in the ecosystem today is kind of like jittering with excitement with, and we haven't even had a governing council announcement yet. So it's like it's really crazy. But appreciate you coming up. And yeah, I'll throw you back down to listeners, but feel free to share your thread to the top, and appreciate you, IPEX.
Appreciate it, brother. Thanks for having me.
Right on. Yeah. So we got some more stuff to talk about. We'll probably loop back on the president stuff later because I can only imagine some more news will break. Who knows if more breaking news will pop off during the show. I have a feeling that we're going to have some stuff like that. But yeah, new Hedera president, big vibe. I dig it. Yeah, I think Big day. Taking a sip of my Coca-Cola. FSCO, the beloved use case helmed by David, CEO, who's very active on Twitter, has been very open with the community, and has kind of been teasing a lot of stuff. We've talked about it a lot on the show, especially the connections to MasterCard. And, you know, I think that it's one of those use cases that is very exciting. It's live now on the network. I think that it is contributing to that 3,000 transactions per second. And there's a lot to unpack here. I'd encourage people to go back and listen to previous episodes of the show. I have talked about this use case quite a bit. I did have David on the show earlier this year, sharing a bunch of stuff. One thing that I don't know is relevant anymore, but when I had David on the show, right, CEO of Fresh Supply Company, which we're talking about, when he was speaking to, I imagine, this news, you know, at that time, you know, coming soon, he mentioned that it's one of two things, and he couldn't talk about the second thing. I don't know if we're still waiting on that second thing. I just wanted to kind of carry that forward, which was, I get the sense based on my conversation with him that this news that came out this week regarding FSCO going live on Hedera, you know, this might be one of two big announcements related to FSCO. That's the sense I get. Now, again, things may have changed, but let's dive into it here. So for folks unfamiliar with FSCO, the big juicy bit about it is MasterCard had a product called MasterCard Provenance, and it was kind of like a private ledger for enterprise, and a lot of people used it, including FSCO. And MasterCard had since sunset their Provenance blockchain product. So FSCO and a lot of other people were like, okay, well, we'll have to find a new DLT to use. And one of their big use cases was they have to be able to connect to MasterCard still, right? You have to get those credit card transactions through the system, and then you have to have a ledger on the other side to, you know, record those things and you know, most likely on HCS. And so that was the big thing, is they were looking for that missing piece. And FSCO has this big tech stack called Continuity, Continuity, their API. And basically what that would allow is all of these people that use MasterCard Provenance to then go and use Hedera for their use cases, supply chain. So the big news today was all of those things we had talked about, all those kind of exciting points, all of these systems that FSCO built that you know, David and their team have been talking about, they're now live on Hedera. So that's really exciting. And a bit of background, this involves, you know, integration of the Hedera token service with FSCO. So the FSCO has integrated HTS into its Continuity API, which monitors payment life cycles and approval processes, enabling conditional minting of both fungible and non-fungible tokens within commercial workflows. And again, this is about food, right? Fresh Supply Company. So this is about, you know, where the cow come from, or what ingredients were combined. Can you get a loan out for different things? You know, can you do that buying and selling automated? Can you have these payment triggers? That's another big element of it. FSCO moved its operations from MasterCard Provenance blockchain to Hedera, enhancing transparency and data verifiability in supply chain and agricultural industries. And their API now utilizes HTS. They're also going to use AI to automate and streamline the tokenization platform, utilizing large language models, kind of like ChatGPT, for data extraction and accelerating tokenization processes. So Very, it's a theme we're seeing. I talked with Matt Smithies from Dovu on the last episode, talking about some of the stuff they're working on, and it involves AI as well. It's really about bringing all these complexities together and recording it on Ledger. The CEO, right, David, noted the increasing adoption of token minting and tracking technologies in various real-world scenarios, emphasizing the need to verify data sources for token tracking. So that's a big part of this. Is there's so much information that needs to be verified. You have to have a high throughput system like Hedera to kind of manage all that. And soon, Hedera's user base will also be able to access MasterCard's payment gateway services, MPGS, and other forthcoming MasterCard Web3 and digital asset products as part of the integration. So to me, that's really the key takeaway from this news story is like, it's two parts. It's part one of this news story is, hey, all this stuff we've been talking about all year when it comes to Fresh Supply Company, right? FSCO, all that stuff that we've already been talking about and circling so long, that's all live now on Hedera, which is really exciting. And then number two, a lot of MasterCard integrations and connectivity is coming further and more than what we have currently. So you can start to connect some dots. You can start to see some things coming into play. And it's really big. And it kind of brings us into our next story, which involves the governing council. It also involves meeting minutes. This is going to be a bit to unpack, but these two stories kind of work together. They kind of go together really well because we brought up MasterCard, governing council, right? It starts to get you going a little bit, and especially as we dive into the meeting minutes. So Hedera published their meeting minutes for September. And funnily enough, too, there is a governing council meeting currently happening right now, right? The December governing council meeting is happening literally right now. Who knows what they're talking about? I guess we'll find out in, 1 or 2 months. But this is the information we got from the October council meeting minutes. And again, just for some context, October was a virtual governing council meeting, and they also had a governing council meeting in November, which was in person in Singapore, which was very interesting. And to me, I think that there are some really juicy rumors in this, and I'll read through a couple aspects of these governing council meeting minutes. And again, this is the information that was talked about during the Hedera governing council meeting together. So first one is Tom S. Reviewed the minutes from September 13th governing council meeting, and members offered some minor corrections. So that was one thing I flagged, which was, okay, so the September governing council meeting, what corrections were needed? Because we don't know what those are. The meeting minutes themselves are tokenized on Proven DB using Hedera to prove that, they're the real minutes, this and that. So we don't have an updated version of those September meeting minutes, but I'm curious to know what corrections, minor corrections were needed. Was it just stuff like a typo, or was it something in regards to a number or a date or something more substantial? It'd be really interesting to know that. Furthermore, Brian reviewed the current HBAR allocation and shared projections based on certain assumptions of key drivers, including network TPS and transaction mix. Referencing the Treasury Management Report, he explained that certain categories of expenses, such as initial development costs and licensing, purchase agreements, and network governance and operations, are largely predetermined based on pre-existing obligations and commitments. So he's basically saying a lot of these kind of costs and use of HBAR are pre-planned when it comes to those types of things. He explained that the allocation to ecosystem and open source development, though, is more flexible and contingent upon the decisions of the council members. He shared that the board is seeking feedback from council members regarding the extent to which the council members want to manage the allocation of ecosystem development requests versus delegating such authority to the board. Specific ecosystem development requests from independent third parties within the Hedera ecosystem will be presented and addressed at the November meeting. So obviously the November meeting happened in person in Singapore. And so this is really interesting. Basically, Brian wants the team's opinion on how to manage the funds and requests when it comes to open source development and the ecosystem. And basically the next meeting they're going to talk about, or not next meeting, but in November's meeting, they talked about requests from other people. So put even simpler, Hedera has money and funds available for ecosystem development, and they want to figure out how to spend it, right? And so it appears to me that who are these third parties? Maybe they're development firms, maybe they're grant giving bodies or whatever it could be. They're looking for guidance on how that could be used, how those funds could be used. And ideas were obviously presented in Singapore at the last governing council meeting. So that's really interesting. Also, this was kind of funny. I'm just, again, reading from the meeting minutes, but Tom reminded the council members that as board members can't vote on matters related to their own compensation. Previously, the council has determined such matters either by voting at the council member level or by delegating authority to a subgroup of disinterested council members. To try to make that process more effective and efficient, there was a proposal for a board oversight committee that, if approved, would have authority to decide on matters involving council programs or initiatives, blah, blah, blah. Basically, he's clarifying that, listen, if, these board members that are being paid, they can't vote on matters related to their own compensation, which makes sense. It's kind of funny. I don't know why that would have to be reiterated or reminded. But the idea of, another kind of, oversight committee or other people that would be tasked with determining how much, these people get paid might be a good thing. I don't think that you should have people that are getting paid on the Hedera board, making decisions, regarding, what their pay is. I don't think it would be the best thing. Continuing, the council members also discussed network economic targets for long-term sustainability and agreed to prepare treasury management decisions in November. So again, in November, it seems like there was a big in-person meeting that took place. This is funny to read too. Brett M., right, the chairman, discussed the upcoming elections for open director and committee chair positions for 2024-2025 term, noting that 4 board seats and 5 committee co-chair seats, one for each of CoinCom, TechCom, CorpCom, and MemCom and RegCom. CoinCom is the kind of like tokenomics. TechCom is the technical committee. CorpCom is the corporate committee. MemCom is the membership committee, and RegCom is the regulatory committee. So lots of committees. Basically, the new leadership is going to open up for 2024. I think that's kind of the theme, is new leadership, fresh people. We got, a new president, all these different stuff. I think there's just a real fresh energy going into next year. Hedera Council staff will issue a call for nominations, so we'll see what comes from that. Elections are going to be running through this month, so we'll find out who those new people are next year. This is really interesting. So this was this I think was the biggest news from the council meeting. Simon O, in his role as membership committee co-chair, provided an update on the pipeline of prospective council members and shared that shortly after the meeting, an e-ballot would be issued to the council members to vote on a prospective member. So I've been seeing a lot of people in the Hedera community commenting on, who could it be? The governing council is voting on a new member. I think that, it is a possibility that the vote could be no, right? The governing council could vote not to have them as part of the council. So we may just see nothing from this, right? But I think the exciting takeaway here is that, this pipeline of new council members, it appears that it's moving. And in October, they voted on a potential new governing council member. Now, that was 2 months ago. So what has happened since? I know that when I had Rob Allen on the show on episode 100, that was at the time when they were in Singapore for the governing council meeting. And I asked Rob, Rob Allen is on the governing council at Australian Payments Plus. And he mentioned that it was, very exciting governing council meeting. There wasn't a lot he could talk about. I pressed him on it, but there wasn't really a lot he could share in regards to specifics. But it does sound like there were some very important big conversations that happened in Singapore. And does that include, a new governing council member? Continuing in the last note here on the meeting minutes, Brett M. updated the council members on the Hedera Council's ongoing search for a new president. Obviously, we know the results of that. Today, the new president for Hedera was announced, which we talked about at the top of the show, but we'll also probably talk a little bit more about it later in the show, just touching on it. But I think it was a big meeting in Singapore, to be honest, and it could have involved a new governing council member. So we'll have to see. Now, the other side to this is the other element of this governing council stuff is there are 13 members of the governing council that are set to have their first term expire, which means that any of those 13 governing council members could leave the governing council at the end of the year. Now, I imagine that all, if not a majority of these governing council members are going to renew for a second term because they can. But the question still remains that I see people talking about in the ecosystem is, will any of these governing council members leave the governing council? And who could that be and why? And I have a few ideas on this. So who are these governing council members? And again, quick refresher for everybody. The governing council is made up of, organizations on Hedera. They run the main nodes right now, and they're term limited. That's what we're talking about, is the end of their first terms are coming up when they could leave the governing council or renew for a second term. And I think they're limited to, 8 years. Then they have to leave, and then they could come back for another term later after a break of 3 years. I can't remember exactly, but it's term limited. It's, it's governance, it's this and that. So who is on the list that could possibly leave, in the new year? Deutsche Telekom, DLA Piper, Magazine Louisa, Tata Communications, Boeing, IBM, WorldPay, FIS, Nomura, Google, Wipro, University College London, Zane Group, and LG Electronics. Those are the governing council members that could either choose to not renew their term at the end of the year or renew their term. Now, I think that all of these governing council members will renew. I don't really see any reason why they wouldn't. I haven't heard any news. I haven't picked up on any signals that would lead me to believe that anyone would leave. So my prediction, personally, from what I know, having done the Hedera News for 2 years, over 2 years, my own prediction is that we're not going to see any governing council members leave the council, to be honest, in the new year. I don't think that that's going to happen. Nothing leads me to believe that. A big clue that I have is if a governing council member were to leave the governing council in the new year, that would mean effectively that they would also shut down their main node or their mainnet node, right? That the network would also lose a node. I don't think that an ex-governing council member would maybe want to do that. And that would necessitate the addition of permission nodes to the Hedera network. right? You would have to have permissioned nodes for a governing council member to leave the council and continue running their node. And we don't have permission nodes yet. So there isn't actually a pathway. It isn't possible for a governing council member to leave the council and continue running a node. It's not possible right now. So that's one clue for me. And the other is, I just don't see them doing it. I think if that were to happen, more would have been done going into the new year to kind of provide a balance to that. We would have seen a new governing council member announcement. We would have seen some kind of maybe, the introduction of permission nodes, but we didn't see that. So that's my personal take. But again, people will ask, hey, but what if someone were to leave the council, who would it be? And what would make me, the two things I would look at to determine if a governing council member were going to leave is how many governing council meetings have they attended, and what news has come out from those governing council members recently. So let's look at, there's actually two governing council members that I think have, if we go into the scenario that, yes, someone is definitely going to leave the council, I think there are two that are a maybe and one that is a strong maybe. So one of them is Deutsche Telekom. They've attended, as of July, they attended 35% of governing council meetings. So very low attendance of governing council meetings. And, there's not a lot of news regarding Deutsche Telekom recently. So not a lot happening on Deutsche Telekom, and they're not attending very many meetings, right? They're attending 3 out of every 10 governing council member meetings. Not a very strong member of the council. The next would be Tata Communications. They've attended 67% of the governing council meetings. So a good amount, but not a ton of, action. So I would say that maybe they would have, if there was anybody, they would be a maybe. But I do think that there's one strong contender on the governing council that would potentially leave in the new year, which would be Zane Group. There's no news. They're yet another telecom company. There's a lot of telecom companies on the governing council. And they've only attended 56% of the governing council meetings. And there's no news. They don't have any news out. So for me, I look at Zane Group. I look at their position on the governing council. I look what they're doing, and I kind of am like, I don't know. They don't seem super, involved. So to summarize, I don't think that we're going to lose any governing council members in the new year. If we did, it would mean they would have to get rid of their nodes, and I just don't think that's going to happen. Now, the other side to this is who could be joining the governing council? What's the other side to this is, obviously we're going to have a new governing council member joining at some point. The governing council just voted on a new potential member. There's lots of rumors swirling around. I asked the community back in, this was a couple months ago, who would we think would be governing council members? And there's some great options. Obviously at the top of everyone's list is MasterCard. People are saying Walmart, Microsoft, Amazon, Sony, right? PayPal. But also too, we need to look at other sectors that might be underrepresented on the council. That's something Christian Hasker was saying. The head of marketing for Hedera, he said that, there's a goal that new council members will join that are from underrepresented industries. When you think about that, you think about, okay, food, right? A food company maybe. So lots of interesting stuff. I think there's been a lot of predictions. I think currently we look at who's closest to the surface. And again, I'll just speak personally. I look at Hyundai, right? What we've heard from the governing council and Hedera and Swirlds and everybody is they focus on use cases, right? They want new governing council members that are currently building and have use cases on Hedera. And when you look at Hyundai, they're building on Hedera. You know, very recently they announced that they would be utilizing Hedera for their own supply chain, right? Their own manufacturing. And they recently teamed up with LG, a governing council member, for their in-car entertainment system. So you look at Hyundai and you go, there's a great contender for a governing council member. They're obviously already connected to the council. They have a use case going. They fit the criteria. They're in the automotive industry, which is, you know, a new sector. And they're focusing on a supply chain use case, which is right up the alley of Hedera, in the, you know, carbon offset space. So right there, it checks so many boxes for me. I think that Hyundai is a strong contender. I also think MasterCard is a strong contender, right? I think that, you know, from what we've seen with FSCO, the fact that MasterCard has partnered with quite a few use cases on Hedera already, and clearly many of their ex-clients are now using Hedera. I think that, you know, they're also a strong contender. I don't know if they're building on Hedera currently, but I think they're a strong contender. And we also look at Microsoft, also partnered with a lot of different use cases. For example, you know, MTech with their CBDC stuff, Microsoft is partnered with that. So Microsoft has been, you know, partnered with various use cases in the Hedera ecosystem for a long time. Obviously, that industry on the governing council is a little bit crowded, right? We already have IBM, we already have Google. So, you know, I don't know if Microsoft is a company that Hedera is necessarily targeting, but I think when it comes to, you know, AI and different things like that, it could be interesting. And then there's a bunch of other different contenders. I mean, we've talked about them all. I think that the predictions are out there. There's something about companies like Hyundai that just, I don't know, it just feels like natural, right, for Hedera to announce them as a governing council member. They're building on the network. It just feels a little natural. It's a new industry. It's the automotive industry. It's a supply chain use case. It checks all the boxes. So, in my opinion, if I had to say my own personal prediction, I'd probably say Hyundai. But again, it literally could be anything. As we've known time and time again, when a governing council member is announced, it's not one of the ones on our bingo card, and that held true with Dell, right? I mean, who saw that coming? Who saw Dell coming to the governing council? I certainly didn't. Who saw Kofra coming to the governing council? I didn't. I didn't even know what Kofra was. And so I think that, you know, there's obviously, you know, predictions we can make, but I think there's a higher likelihood of the new governing council member being somebody that isn't part of our predictions at all. So there's that. I want to switch gears a little bit. I want to talk about transactions really quick, and then get into some other, you know, other things that are maybe not specifically Hedera related. We saw a dip in transactions on the network recently. I see Ray from Dead Pixels listening. Shout out to you. He tweeted out on December 11th a screenshot from Metrica. And, you know, I think we've seen this in the past before. You know, the mainnet will drop down in transactions and have a sudden dip we saw it go from 2,000 transactions per second average down to 600, like that, snap of the finger. And, you know, I think that on the surface, that's kind of shocking, but I think that we see that regularly in the network, because most of these high throughput use cases are from a limited number of organizations. So definitely the transaction flow on Hedera is pretty closely aligned to their own business use cases. Like if they decide, if Avery Dennison decides like, oh, we need to do an upgrade, we need to turn things off for a minute. It's like, that's going to have a huge impact on the network. And I think that happened before. And I think it kind of spooked people initially, but I think we've learned kind of like, okay, until we have, many more high throughput use cases, if somebody decides to kind of spin things down for a minute, of course, we're going to see the whole network take a dip in transactions. So I think when it happens, the Hedera community is largely unaffected. I think what was really interesting here was when things came back, they came back in a big way. We're now averaging close to 3,000 transactions per second, right? We started the year at 9. We started the year averaging 9 transactions per second. We're averaging 3,000 transactions per second now. And, I think that that's kind of like, it's kind of wild. And, people will go, oh, Atma is subsidized. I've talked about that quite a bit on the show. I mean, you definitely can have use cases that are, funded by the foundation, this and that, but Avery Dennison, Atma is not, using that HBAR they're provided to buy equipment or pay staff or anything like that. It's not like that value is leaving the network. They're using it to pay for transactions, which may I remind you that a portion of those payments are going into your wallet because you're staking HBAR, and it's going back into the ecosystem. It's just cycling through. So it's not like, yeah, it would be great if Atma.io and Avery Dennison were, paying for their own transactions. But I mean, revenue for Hedera as a company has done a 10x over the last year. So that's impressive, not including Avery Dennison. And, like the value is not leaving the network. That HBAR is not being sold to pay for staff. It's just going back into the ecosystem. So it's different, right? I think that there's a lot of nuance to that. I don't think a lot of people understand that. I don't think how the more I talk about it and explain it, I don't think is going to help. I just think that, look at the metrics. Like these are external transactions paid for by external parties to the Hedera network. With that, I mean, we also see the HBAR price. HBAR price is, seeing a similar appreciation. We've moved up quite a few spots in market cap. The highest I've seen recently is we're now number 27 in market cap. And the volatility of HBAR has increased. We've seen ranges from, 6 cents to almost 8 cents over the last couple of weeks, which is a big increase in that, volatility. And it's a very exciting time, right? We have the announcement of these major use cases going live on the network, FSCO. We have the announcement of a new Hedera president just hours ago. So you start to see a little bit of an energy starting to pick up. It's exciting. Transactions. We talk about transactions a lot. This also brings us to another story, which is the Bitcoin ETF, which everyone is talking about. And I'm kind of tired of it, but I'm still excited about it. We started talking about it earlier this year. When I say we, I mean everybody on the in crypto. But I think it grabbed the attention of a lot of people in Hedera because what does a Bitcoin ETF mean, right? An ETF is an exchange traded fund, which traditionally holds all sorts of different stocks. But you can go on the stock market right now and buy exchange traded funds that contain all sorts of things. It could contain a bundle of stocks. And in the future, it could contain a bundle of crypto, right? So think about the big money people that don't necessarily want to open a wallet, right? Or get a seed phrase. They have their own systems, their regulations. They have to go on the New York Stock Exchange, and they have to purchase financial assets through reputable, systems or whatever, regulated entities or whatever. And they want to buy Bitcoin. Well, if there's an ETF, an exchange traded fund available on a major exchange, that, you're on your Bloomberg terminal and you want to buy Bitcoin, you would buy this Bitcoin ETF from BlackRock, right? iShares. A lot of people that invest in stocks are currently holding BlackRock investment products, like iShares stuff, maybe from Vanguard as well. There's a lot of Bitcoin ETFs, but that's the exciting part about it. And I want to go back on something that Mance Harmon, again, co-founder of Hedera, said earlier this year when asked, when will the bull market come and what will cause it? And Mance Harmon said he doesn't see the bull market coming until the second half of next year, 2024. And he says that's largely because, the current American administration, the government has a lot of sway in regards to what happens in the financial markets, and that's not going to change for a bit. We're in a bear market, and it's going to take a lot to change that too. So he's talking about macro factors, but he did say if there was a catalyst to make things happen faster, that catalyst would be Wall Street. And so that's why all of the eyeballs are on this Bitcoin ETF, because if there is a Bitcoin ETF available, so many people are going to purchase it, from major companies and corporations and institutions to regular everyday people in their like Robinhood app. And it means that they don't have to open a wallet. They don't have to do anything like that. It brings liquidity into crypto in an all new way. It's another pillar of this mass adoption we talk about. Everybody's very excited about it. So what's the new news here? Well, the new news on the Bitcoin ETF is that BlackRock has updated their filing for it with new information. So that filing is active. BlackRock is being proactive for that filing. And also, Google has updated its crypto ad policies. So what that means is very likely, and the updates that have that have been made are clearly to accommodate something like a Bitcoin ETF. Because think about it. If, let's say, BlackRock or Robinhood or any one of these kind of entry points, or the New York Stock Exchange or whatever it may be, were to run advertisements online or in the Super Bowl or whatever, advertising this new opportunity, obviously you would need some kind of guidelines for that. And so the update to Google's ad policy says in January 2024, Google will update the cryptocurrencies and related products policy to clarify the scope and requirements for the advertisements of cryptocurrency coin trusts. Beginning January 29th, 2024, advertisers offering cryptocurrency coin trust targeting the United States may advertise those products and services when they meet the following requirements and are certified by Google. Financial products that allow investors to trade shares in trusts holding large pools of digital currency. So this is literally Google updating their advertising ad policies for crypto right in alignment with something like a Bitcoin ETF. So people are joking that they expect at least one Super Bowl ad for a Bitcoin ETF. We look at institutions like BlackRock, Fidelity. They're going to spend big on ads in the first quarter of next year. I think that this update in particular lends a lot of weight to these getting approved, a high likelihood of that. So that's the update there on that. I'm excited about it. It's a developing story, but it is a very big one. It affects everybody. Like stuff like that directly affects Hedera. If there's more money in this ecosystem, right, more liquidity, more value, Bitcoin goes up in price, that translates to growth for every network, including Hedera. So that is a big one. Next story I wanted to chat about real quick. It isn't really a story. I just wanted to kind of loop back on a couple of things. And this is in regards to carbon offset credit stuff. I posted a video clip from episode 104 last week's episode. I had a great conversation with Matt Smithy, CTO of Dovu. We talked about carbon credits. And what I wanted to do is, I mean, there's COP28. There was all the different crazy announcements that came out. Lots of really like big ideas, big numbers, trillions of dollars, big market, carbon credit. It's so complex and it's so crazy. And I think a lot of people are excited about it, but I just don't know if Hashgraph enthusiasts, right? If listeners of this show, if members of the HBAR community, like really understood what does it mean for them, right? Like, what is that all about? And I had a great conversation with them. And the key takeaway was what it is these carbon credits that you see talked about by the HBAR Foundation and Hedera and Swirlds, these carbon credits that you see, being talked about by, within the scope of the Hedera Guardian that we all see. What these are NFTs. These are NFTs that are HIP 412 compliant. And they're the exact same as any NFT that you're familiar with, like a Dead Pixels or a Hangry Barboons or an Hgraph Punks, or whatever it might be. These are just NFTs. And when these carbon credits go for sale, it's like an NFT drop, right? You can go to the Dovu website. You can see these different projects, right? For maybe it's the retiring vehicles in India. You can purchase those credits. These are like effectively kind of NFT drops that you purchase and they sell out and you hold these NFTs. And as we are familiar with, when you hold those NFTs, you buy them, the project sells out, the floor price changes. The secondary market changes those prices. People want to purchase those from you. And as Matt said, these carbon credits, right? These carbon offset credits, all these different products, these NFTs, you're going to be able to buy and sell them on marketplaces like Centex, right? Or you're going to be able to buy and sell them on some carbon offset credit specific marketplace, right? That's more specialized. But these are just regular NFTs you're going to hold in your wallet, your Hedera wallet, like, Hashpack or Blade or Galaxy or whatever it is. That's literally all these are. And then you go kind of like, well, what's the utility? And the utility is, for example, in the use case with India retiring vehicles, is you're going to be able to take that carbon credit, and when you go to purchase a vehicle, you're going to get a discount on the vehicle. If you're an enterprise and you purchase one of these, maybe a certain type of one of these carbon offset credits, you're going to be able to prove the quality of it because it's tokenized on Hedera, and you're going to be able to retire it to offset your carbon footprint, right? So there's value, and not all these enterprises are going to buy these initially. And this is where retail comes in. The buyers of these carbon credits you might buy are probably going to be enterprise. It's probably going to be big companies. And so that's really the exciting thing. It's kind of just like what HBAR is. Like, HBAR isn't really designed for a lot of people listening to this show. HBAR is designed as a fuel to run an application on the network. But people who are speculative retail investors buy HBAR right now because the demand for HBAR will go up, and therefore enterprises will be willing to pay more to purchase that HBAR to use for their use cases. So it's the supply demand type thing. And so I'm learning a little more how much simpler these carbon offset credits are. They're NFTs, like we already know, and they're going to be available in the form of, it's very similar to drops, and you're going to be able to buy them. And it's funny because that's how the market for carbon offsets currently works. But the problem is that it's not transparent, right? And it creates an environment where people don't trust it. We know that there's a lot of fraud, all these different types of things. So that's what makes this really exciting. That's what makes this really interesting, is this carbon credit stuff. That's really all it is. And Rob Allen commented on this, video that I shared, like there was just a clip from last week's show, to a person asking a question about this. And the question was, let me see here. What did Rob Allen respond to? Or did he delete it? I can't remember. Anyways, what Rob Allen said, the question was basically like, so what do I do with these carbon credits? Like, what's the point of this? What is offsetting? What is the offsetting part? So Rob Allen says, offset is what one does with a carbon credit. Credits issued on the Hedera Guardian are tokens, NFTs, that one owns and carry real world value as they can be used for speculative purposes on tokenized carbon markets or can be retired to offset one's personal or business impact. Each Guardian carbon credit token carries the trust of all the data captured by the project that creates it. As these markets grow, companies that need to show auditors quality assets will be forced to buy these rather than traditional credits that are not trusted. Who are they going to buy them from? They could be buying them from us. Hedera NFT degens might save the planet. Hedera NFT degens might get rich saving the planet, is all I'm saying. And that was the key insight there is over the year learning about all this stuff, that's what it really comes down to is these are NFT drops. They're exciting new things. Enterprise is going to be buying them from you, or you can use them yourself to offset your carbon footprint. That's all it is. And, the bull run on that is starting next year. And I'm going to be frank. I'm excited about it. It's a new market that fixes a lot of stuff, and it's the future. Like literally at the world leading meetup for this stuff, COP28 that just happened. The Hedera Guardian was highlighted as the leading standard for this stuff. So it's big, and I think it should be on everyone's radar. And I think any NFT collector on Hedera should kind of, do the same research that they do for any project about this stuff. These are just different projects. Instead of learning about, the founding team and, maybe more so what I'd say is like, instead of learning about, how the artwork is made and what ideas there are for the lore of the project or whatever, it's like, you're going to be learning about the farm, the people who own the farm, what they do to issue these carbon credits, the quality of them, how they're minted, or for ecological projects, right? Like how is this wildlife cared for? Learning about those projects and then being able to purchase those NFTs and using those same parts of your brain as you would use to do due diligence on a traditional NFT project. Like all these NFT collectors and traders and degens on Hedera have like built up these muscles and skills to do these kinds of things that I think will serve them well in this new carbon offset space. That's my thoughts. I think it's going to be a bit of a vibe. Music. We're going to talk about music. Hedera Music, NFTs, just quickly. We saw a new platform coming into the fold that we talked about last week, Amplify. We've seen, all sorts of different music NFTs like Vasizi and Vicente doing those stuff. We saw Hgraph Punks and the Launchpad doing like metaverse shows. I'm just taking a minute here to just reflect on it and just keep people's attention on it. Again, on the topic of NFTs, moving beyond just JPEGs and stuff and really looking at, okay, what's the next big thing for NFTs? I also think music is a part of that. Audio NFTs, right? Albums, streaming, ticketing. There's so many different use cases. And when you think about in the real world, when you look at art, truly, half the art that we consume in the real world is art that we listen to. Right? In Web3, probably only 5% of the art that we consume is stuff that we hear. Again, in the real world, half of it is what we hear. So there's a big discrepancy. I think that the growth of music NFTs across crypto is going to grow immensely. And I think what's holding it back is standards, right? I think that it is, how do you make these things? How do you have a standard for this? The whole music industry depends on standards. So standards is a big part of that. And a quick shout out to the Hashgraph NFT working group that has been working all year on some standards for music NFTs that will be published soon in the form of a HIP. I'm lucky to be a part of that group. It's incredible work that's being done. And I think that the work that group does is going to unlock the ability for music NFTs to really, blow up on Hedera. So keep an eye on that. But I would say new year, music NFTs on Hedera, I think it's gonna be pretty crazy. Flutterwave money transmission. So Flutterwave has secured 13 new money transmission licenses in the U.S. And services 29 states with its Send app remittance solution. And this is a solution using Hedera. So for folks unfamiliar with Flutterwave, we talked about them on episode 98. Flutterwave integrated the USDC stablecoin on the Hedera network, aiming to revolutionize cross-border payments in Africa. This collaboration seeks to offer instant, affordable payments and remittances, tackling issues like high transaction costs and slow settlement times. The partnership, which was announced at the Africa Money and DeFi Summit, West Africa, aligns with Flutterwave's mission to simplify payments across the continent and Hedera's goal to enhance network utilization. So this recent news is basically, they've acquired money transfer licenses for 13 states, which is big. And you've probably also seen the news of, Elon Musk at X securing money transfer licenses in various states. This is what's going to allow people to become payment processors effectively, right? For X to become a payment processor itself. So the states include Arizona, Arkansas, Maryland, Michigan, Delaware, Georgia, Maine, Mississippi, Missouri, New Hampshire, Iowa, North Dakota, and South Dakota. With the licenses and a partnership with another licensed financial institution, Flutterwave can now serve customers in 29 U.S. states. These licenses allow Flutterwave to enable faster, more affordable, and secure money transfers between the United States and Africa. The licenses are crucial for Flutterwave solutions like the Send app, which facilitates money transfers between the U.S. and South Africa. Stephen Chang, Executive Vice President of Global Expansion and Partnerships at Flutterwave, emphasized the importance of these licenses in expanding their regulatory footprint and building trust with regulators, partners, and customers. The licenses are part of Flutterwave's commitment to working with regulators to safely help send customer funds. And again, this is leveraging USDC on the Hedera network. So we're talking about real world use cases that are truly global and tying into those traditional finance rails, which is really, really exciting. And I think that, when we look at a news story like this, I think, again, this is one that I think is going to continue to fly under the radar a little bit. I think that this is one that we're not really going to see really pop off for a while, but this infrastructure is being laid. And when you look at, again, some of the stuff that MTech is doing with CBDCs, especially, I had a great conversation with their CEO, Carmel Cadet, on a recent episode of the show, talking about what they're working on. And you look at the things happening over in Africa with, payment infrastructure. It's just really exciting. And I think that when you look at how Hedera is positioned as a global network, all these things, right? There's so many dots that you can just start connecting right away. I want to talk a little bit, just really quick, on Bitcoin and Ordinals. This is just for a little bit of context, heading into a bull market, and kind of seeing what other networks are dealing with. And we saw that the Bitcoin network, and again, the BRC-20 tokens are effectively, it's like a duct tape solution in Bitcoin to allow other coins to be on Bitcoin, right? Because initially Bitcoin, the network, you only have Bitcoins, but you can't really build anything on top of Bitcoin. So they have these new kind of bootstrapped, duct taped solutions to allow you to have more coins. And the problem is, on December 6th, there was a headline that came out from cryptonews.net that grabbed my attention. Bitcoin network stressed by BRC-20 token surge, fees soar amid transaction backlog. So the Bitcoin network is currently under heavy load and in a congested state due to the popularity of BRC-20 tokens. It has impacted the transaction times and costs for sending Bitcoin. According to mempool.space, there are more than 280,000 unconfirmed transactions on the Bitcoin network. Furthermore, memory pool usage has exceeded 300 megabytes and has reached 1.57 gigabytes. In essence, the mempool is Bitcoin's quote-unquote waiting area for transactions that each full node maintains for itself. Once a node has verified a transaction, it waits inside the mempool until it is picked up by a miner and inserted into a block. Once the mempool fills up, nodes begin to prioritize transactions by setting a minimal transaction fee threshold. So this is where it gets really interesting. Only transactions with a large enough fee can access the mempool, which also reduces transaction spam. Nevertheless, it also increases transaction costs for genuine transactions. And at the time of December 6th, transaction fees had increased to between $14 and $16, depending on the priority. So transaction fees on these other networks are starting to creep up a little bit. And there are a lot of different arguments happening on Bitcoin. And when you think about a bull market coming in and some of these other networks with their, with transaction fees and gas, what we saw in the last bull run with, incredibly high fees on Ethereum and Bitcoin, it really makes you wonder, how that mass adoption is going to happen, because generally to deal with those high transaction fees, you have to sacrifice security, you have to create another layer. And so you kind of look at Hedera as an alternative, and it really starts to make you think, will that contrast be seen in this bull market? Will people start to look more at Hedera as a contending alternative for, Bitcoin or Ethereum, just because of these issues that happen? The other side to this is Ordinals. So Ordinals is obviously, NFTs on Bitcoin. And the struggle with that is it's heavily centralized currently. There are arguments to be made on both sides of it, but effectively, we've talked about it on the show quite a bit. I had Patches on the show from the Hedera community to talk about Ordinals and the need for governance, the fact that effectively when Ordinals got started, and kind of still to this day, it's really just a couple of people that control it. But there is billions of dollars worth of money flowing through the Ordinals NFT ecosystem. So on the other side, it's a massive market. The breaking news here is that Ordinals was submitted to the NIST National Vulnerability Database for the U.S. federal government. And, the kind of true Bitcoin maintainers and developers are starting to turn sour on Ordinals, because there's all these new things built on top of Bitcoin that's starting to clog up the network. And so we're reaching a turning point in the Bitcoin network of, are we going to see another fork of Bitcoin? And it's going to be very interesting to kind of see what that means, and what that entails. How many boats is that going to rock? I'm very interested to see what happens with that. My hope, to be honest, is that balance can be found, through governance, through proper development, through different BIPs, right? Bitcoin improvement proposals, that the network can grow, that it doesn't have to fork, all these different types of things. But I think that the general sentiment to a lot of people driving these initiatives like BRC-20 tokens and Ordinals, don't really care about that because of the money. There's a lot of money there. It's huge. And I worry that the Bitcoin network could fork. And I don't know what that means. Then it brings us back to the Bitcoin ETF and all these different types of things. And it's like, what does that mean for stuff like that? What's going on with all that kind of stuff? It's very interesting to think about. And again, this is happening in a bear market where there isn't a lot of activity. Will these things withstand a bull market, or will it just cause things to crumble a little bit? I don't really know. I think someone great to follow on this in the Hedera ecosystem is Patches. Definitely follow Patches from Turtle Moon and HGraph Punks. He has a lot of great information on ordinals. And I think that, he's a good one to follow on these different updates. And he has a lot of great recent posts on that. And that brings us to our last story of the day. And I'll kind of loop through back to the main points of this week. I'm actually just going to check real quick if we have any kind of like breaking news, because you never know. No, I don't think we have anything happening right now. Right now, who knows what happens when the show's over. But also, too, real quick, like if anyone has any news items that I should share about anything, feel free to use the comment button at the bottom right of the Twitter Spaces here. Share any updates with me. Tata just shared the latest news. We talked about the governing council, potential members leaving, the fact that Zane might be a contender for a council member that might leave the governing council member because of their low attendance to Hedera governing council meetings and lack of news. HBAR Tata at HBAR Tata just sent me a note on Zane in May. This is from, I believe, a Hedera governing council meeting. It said, Richard M. shared Zane's vision for a Hedera enabled global telecommunications ecosystem platform. In particular, he discussed current challenges with roaming settlement between telecom carriers, the past efforts of GSMA, and the vision and plans for a consortium-led approach to achieve wide adoption of the proposed telco ecosystem platform. The solution will be funded initially by grants from the Hashgraph Association and BCGX, with near-term plans for a sprint to validate the vision and mobilize participants. So there you go. Even less of a chance that we'll see a governing council member leave the council this year. Clearly, although there hasn't been a lot of news from Zane, and they have a low council member attendance. Seems they have a vision. It seems there's an initiative getting started. And we did hear from, I can't remember who it was. I think it may have been Mance, again, co-founder of Hedera. He did mention that even if a governing council member has a low attendance to meetings, it doesn't necessarily mean that they, aren't building on the network or aren't moving and shaking. They may just be building currently and then will come up for air later. So Zane might be one of those. So appreciate that, Tata. My last story is basically the struggles of a bull market, as we saw recently in the Hedera community. I don't want to, mention anyone specifically. Peace and love to everybody. We start to see the struggles of a potential bull market. I think that you look at people within the Hedera ecosystem, maybe you call them influencers, maybe you call them connectors, new people doing news, all those different types of things. There's many sides to it, right? Maybe there are certain people who consider themselves influencers that feel threatened when new people enter the ecosystem that could also be considered an influencer. Or maybe someone enters as an influencer with ill intentions. Or maybe someone just comes in too hot and heavy, or it's overwhelming. Sometimes if you become a lightning rod for attention or conversation, you're definitely going to attract all sorts of viewpoints, and many of those will just not be friendly to you. So again, as we approach a bull market, there's kind of two arguments to be made here, and a certain reality to accept. The reality is that we're going to see many influencer types, grifters, all sorts of different people enter the Hedera ecosystem as more money flows into the ecosystem, as the price of HBAR goes up. And, that's just a reality, and you got to be careful. Now, what are the two things we have to keep in mind? So the one thing we got to keep in mind is that, yes, you have to be careful. You got to do your due diligence. You got to call people out on bullshit. And you have to also kind of keep grounded as possible, right? Like it's important to react appropriately. When you see someone enter the HBAR ecosystem that's very exciting and very loud and very powerful, it's the natural reaction to kind of go like, whoa, check it out. This is exciting. But then it can cause a bit of a burnout. It can cause things to spin out. You can fly too close to the sun. But the second thing to keep in mind is, I know that in the past, we've had people enter the ecosystem that, you could argue, scammed people or grifted people or whatever. But I think that the ultimate, the worst thing that could happen is if those folks took out some of the magic of this ecosystem. And what I mean by that is this ecosystem becoming unwilling to welcome in new energies and new exciting people. Because there will be culture clashes, right? There will be, people that don't quite fit the traditional H-barbarian culture, right? They'll be coming from other networks. They'll be coming from outside of crypto, and they'll be very excited. They'll be looking for opportunity in this ecosystem. And people maybe want to call it gatekeeping or whatever it is. I think what it really comes down to is it's like, to be very simple about it, it's like relationships and love, right? It's like you get hurt by certain relationships, and over time it can prevent you from opening up to new things and out of a pain response to not wanting to get hurt again. And I don't want this community to get calloused in that way. I don't want this community to kind of like get closed off by those things. The reality is that people will enter this ecosystem with ill intent. People will get scams. These things will happen. I don't think anything will help us avoid that from ever happening. I think that what will be helpful is educating each other, is being very careful, is creating new ways for us to do due diligence, and have important conversations. But I also think that something that could be to the community's detriment is raising red flags too early sometimes. And again, it's not because it shouldn't be done. Sometimes it's because, again, it's like you've been hurt in the past, you've been scammed in the past. And it's like one of those things where it's like, if you only have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. What I'm trying to say is I don't want to see the Hedera community get so calloused that, we can close ourselves off to opportunity or welcoming new people into the ecosystem that might come in with the wrong approach, that might not make sense initially, that might come in a little too hot. I don't want to see those things. It's a tough balance, right? On one side, you want to avoid scammers. You want to avoid, people working the flim flam. You want to avoid those things. You want to stay safe. But on the other side, you don't want to go too far to close off certain doors and be kind of seen as gatekeeping or those different types of things. So it's a tough balance. And I think that we're going to see a lot of things play out in that regard in this ecosystem. And I think that's my wish, is I hope that, that it's not the case that, that Hedera, becomes so calloused that, it can't kind of let new people in and stuff like that. So there is a bull market coming, and there will be struggles that come with it. Just as there's a bear market and there's struggles, bull markets have struggles as well. And I think, just looping back on things here as we get into the show, or the end of the show, just taking a sip of my bevy here. I think that what it really comes down to is it's been a bear market. We haven't had a ton of big substantial news. We haven't heard about a new governing council member. We haven't seen a big pump in HBAR, yada, yada, yada. I think that, we may start to see those things, right? We're starting to see HBAR appreciate in price. We had the announcement of a new Hedera president. There are major use cases going online, right? We talked about it on the show just now. The governing council is voting on new governing council members. It's happening. And we're starting to see the beginning signs of it. And I think that we're starting to see the beginning signs of a bull market overall, right? But I think that the big thing here is kind of just staying balanced a little bit. And I think also like staying balanced, but also leaning into the hype. Like something I talk about on the show quite frequently is like, when we look at, substance versus hype, the big slogan in the Hedera ecosystem for a long time was, all substance, no hype. And I think that's a little outdated. I think that also expecting Hedera to, hype everything is maybe, also the wrong approach, right? I think that it's kind of like Hedera has the substance stuff covered, and it's, the community is like, I think we're going into a bull market. We're free to hype it, guys. Like, I think that like we're free to do the crazy price predictions, post images of charts, get people excited about stuff. All of these different things. I think that it's time to start getting a little crazy. I think it's time to start having some fun. Let the guard down, lean into it. The holidays are coming. We're going to be hanging out with family. Like we talk about TVL, TPS, TVR. What about FUN? Let's have some fun, right? It's clear that Hedera has stuff figured out, right? I think it's time to take broad strokes. Like we don't need to be in arguments with people on X and social media arguing about, data and rounding errors. You can literally just say like, Hedera is the fastest, most used, most affordable, and environment friendly DLT on the planet, period. That's just a fact. I think when you start explaining things, you get yourself in a losing position. I think that what you want to do is you want to raise questions. You want to cause a little bit of controversy. You want to have some of those debates, but you want to have it from a place of like, broad strokes. I think if you're a network that doesn't have the technical capabilities to back those things up, you shouldn't be doing those things. But Hedera has the technical capabilities to back up those statements. So I think the wrong approach is not making those bold claims and bold blanketed statements and being too worried about specifics or nuance. The crypto industry is not an industry of idle standing people that you speak to, right? Where you have their attention. The crypto industry is a merry-go-round spinning at 1,000 rotations per second. So you have to have broad, bold statements to grab people's attention and get them asking questions. And it's okay if, they don't get it or they disagree or they spread FUD or whatever. It's like, those are byproducts of getting attention. I think that, you should address misinformation for sure. But don't be afraid to make bold claims. Don't be afraid to hype stuff up a little bit. Like, the bear market, I think we definitely had to, operate in a particular way as a community, but I think we kind of have to let some stuff go now. We kind of have to go, okay, let's have some fun. Let's lighten up a bit. Because when we look at mass adoption, when we look at retail, when we look at people coming over to other networks, what are they going to want? They're going to want to go where the fun is. They're going to want to go where the money is. They're going to want to go where the big green candles are. They're going to want to go where the meme coins are. They want to go where the NFTs are. It's literally that simple. What does it take for us to get there? Right? That's really all that matters. Because Hedera's got the other stuff covered, clearly. Swirled has the other stuff covered. The foundation has the other stuff covered. They're doing all the kind of like boring substance stuff that is important, that is enterprise, that is government, and they're obviously killing it and doing a great job. But I think that, as a community, we kind of got to shake it off a little bit and, cut loose. And now with this new president at Hedera, Charles Atkins, with experience marketing at Nike, Red Bull, and Walt Disney, financial experience at Morgan Stanley, the U.S. Department of Treasury, Web3 experience in leadership positions at Polygon and Aptos. Bringing that into Hedera, I think that is somebody that can help feed into that a little bit. Maybe he's going to be able to say to Hedera, like, hey, it's not the worst thing that, people are popping off about stuff and going a little crazy. It's not that bad. It's not too crazy. And with that, another week continues. A quick mention, I completely forgot to mention that, the Hashgraph Enthusiasts Show averages about 500 listeners per episode on X Spaces, which is crazy, and hundreds more on podcast platforms. Over the years, I've covered every major Hedera news event, unpacked almost every juicy rumor, and hosted countless in-depth discussions with important figures in the Hedera ecosystem. And I've been able to do it all live with you guys. And yeah, I got new equipment. I got new gear. I think that next year in the show is just going to continue getting better and better and better. It's all because of supporters of the show. I'm just sending HBAR to the show, and I, spend it improving the show, improving how the research is done, improving the production, and just more content, like more short form content will be coming, video stuff will be coming. And I spend, hundreds and hundreds of hours every year, on the show. And, I'll just keep doing it as is, 'cause I love it. But as people contribute to the show, it tells me to, make it bigger, make it better, scale it, spend more time on it. So I just really appreciate the supporters. You can send a contribution to enthusiast.hbar using your Hedera wallet. Fund memos appreciated. The full wallet address of the show is in the podcast show notes, YouTube description, and the Jumbotron up top for folks listening live on X Spaces. And a free way, if you don't have any HBAR to spare, to support the show is just leave a review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Google, or leave a comment on YouTube. It helps big time. You can leave a tip on Galaxy as well. Let me know how the show sounds after the show, like with the recording. I mean, Twitter Spaces doesn't have the best audio quality, but go and listen to the recording on major podcast platforms and YouTube. I'm curious to see, people's thoughts on kind of how it sounds, the new music, the audio components, all those different types of things. I'm going to continue kind of learning, what sounds good, really get those fine tweaks in, and kind of using this to the full potential. Another cool thing real quick is what I'm going to be able to do is stuff like this. Check this out. I'm going to start playing the Lehman Harvard talk right here.
It's not good enough for me to just show you some file signed by the DMV that says I had a driver's license, because maybe I got into some accidents and they pulled my driver's license. Maybe they revoked it. They canceled it.
Right? Like, how cool is that?
We want to be able to do revocation. We want the DMV to be able to.
So I can just play stuff from YouTube and different things. So it's just, the show's going to be better. I got the new equipment. I got it because of the show. The show raised enough money to buy a bunch of podcast equipment. So for me, it's like, how cool is that? I think it's fantastic. So shout out to everyone listening live on Spaces right now. I appreciate all you guys. Shout out to the supporters, everyone listening to stuff. The theme of the show this week was, it will never be the same. And I meant that about the show. And I think that's true for the whole Hedera ecosystem. So many things are changing. So many new people are coming in to the ecosystem from the top to the bottom. And there's many more use cases. We're at 3,000 transactions per second. The price is going up. Think about it. On the last bull run of Hedera, we had no NFTs. We had no meme coins. We had no marketplaces. We had no DeFi, no nothing. There was nothing. And HBAR rose to 50 cents, right? And also we had, a tiny amount of transactions per second. We had like 9 or 20 transactions per second. We had nothing. And still we experienced a sizable bull run. And with a bull run approaching, right, we have a grown governing council. We have a new president. We have 3,000 transactions per second. We have DeFi with 40 million TVL, right? We have major use cases. We have NFTs. We have marketplaces. We have wallets. Do you see what I'm saying? It's a different game. It's a different vibe. And that's a wrap for the Hashgraph Enthusiast News episode 105. It will never be the same. Broadcast live on Spaces every Wednesday at 12 p.m. Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific, and made available on all major podcast platforms the following Thursday. So tomorrow. And I'll be doing some more interviews in the new year. It'll be a vibe. Reminder, the next episode will be the last episode of the year. I will be taking a break for the holidays. So make sure to tune in next week. It'll be the last show of the year. If you'd like to become a supporter of the show, make sure to make an HBAR contribution. I appreciate everybody so much. And you can get all the info about the show at itsbrandond.com/HBAR. And I'll see you next Wednesday for the news. And as usual, for everyone listening live now, if you see someone that you know, or if you don't know, click their profile picture on Twitter. Send them a DM, ask them what's new, ask them what's going on. I'm just so happy about the new setup for the podcast. I can't wait for next year. It's a vibe. What a big week. And with that, hello future. Goodbye past.
Thanks for listening to the Hashgraph Enthusiasts Show, hosted by Brandon Davenport.
Listen to past episodes and support the show at itsbrandond.com/HBAR.
Also, how hilarious are those two? I call them Hashgraph Howie and H. Barbara. A lot of people might not know that I have a couple AI research assistants that I use that are named Hashgraph Howie and H. Barbara. They help me with the show. I'm happy to feature them in the intro now. So thank you. Thank you, Hashgraph Howie and H. Barbara. Take care, everybody.